Hi, I'm Catherine Redgwell. I'm the Chichele Professor of Public International Law, and I'm here to say a few words to you about the International Law of the Sea course. Now, the International Law of the Sea has a very long tradition. In fact, if we talk about the grandfather, or probably we have to call it the great-great-great-grandfather of international law, Hugo Grotius, in the 17th century he wrote Mare Liberum, a treatise that was designed to support the Dutch East India Company's pretensions to colonization around the world and the freedom of the high seas. So indeed, as an international law subject, the law of the sea dates back to the 17th century and is intimately linked with, indeed, the origins of our subject. Indeed, at Oxford, it also has a long tradition. Two of my predecessors in the Chichele chair, D.P. O'Connell and A.V. Lowe, were specialists in law of the sea, and indeed it's a particular interest of mine as well. You're coming here to do a BCLM jur, my MSc in another place was on sea use law and policy, so I've had an intense interest in the issue, though I grew up very landlocked. You'll be studying this subject on an island, albeit in a city a bit landlocked, but whether landlocked or coastal, all states have an interest in the uses of the ocean, and the reasons for this are probably pretty obvious. The oceans cover 70% of the Earth's surface, and indeed, if we look at international trade, 90% of it is seaborne trade, whether it's commodities in bulk or the most valuable commodity by trade, international oil and gas. So in this course we will be examining a subject that has a long tradition both here at Oxford and in the study of public international law generally. And so if you have an interest in public international law, you'll find the law of the sea is an ideal vehicle for exploring some of the fundamental principles of international law, from its sources through to jurisdiction, responsibility and dispute settlement. But because it's a public international law subject, we won't be looking at other aspects of the oceans that are addressed in more private law or commercial law subjects. So we don't address admiralty law or maritime law or marine insurance, for example. What we do address are the rights and duties that states, whether landlocked or coastal, enjoy in various maritime zones, whether that's the regulation of shipping or indeed the exploitation of offshore resources, non-living resources like oil and gas, or living resources such as fisheries. Indeed, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing is a key area of enforcement concern in international law, and it's one of the issues that we'll be looking at on this course. We also examine issues like maritime security, the use of the oceans for non-peaceful purposes. We look also at human rights implications of the uses of the oceans. You'll be very well aware from the news that we have very important issues about refugees at sea. What rights do they have with respect to entry into coastal states? What enforcement measures or indeed responsibilities do coastal states have with respect to refugees at sea? In addition, of course, we look at some of the traditional areas of the uses of the oceans, and by this I mean principally shipping. What rights and duties do coastal states have with respect to ships in their waters, whether they're warships, oil tankers, or tankers carrying nuclear fuel for reprocessing? What rights do third states have in terms of the routes that their ships can enjoy around the world, particularly bearing in mind the importance of the oceans for trade? But of course the oceans are not just a highway. I've mentioned fisheries. The protection of the marine environment from a host of human activities that can have adverse effects on the marine environment are one of the areas of focus on the course, and that general obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment, whether it's the ecosystems of the environment or species for which the ocean is a habitat. So we look at the Whaling Convention, for example, and the extent to which states have regulated or indeed outlawed whaling at sea. We also, of course, examine the use of the oceans for energy themselves, not just the energy that we find in the continental shelf, the subsurface oil and gas, but the increasing use of the offshore sector for marine renewable energy, whether it's wind farms or harnessing the energy of the oceans themselves. So energy at sea more broadly is another of the topic areas that we look at in the course. So roughly the course is divided between an examination of the maritime zones and the rights and duties that states enjoy in each of those zones, the so-called zonal approach, and then we have cross-sectoral issues, the ones I've already mentioned, of protection of the marine environment, fisheries, maritime security, human rights at sea, and so on. And then finally, of course, no subject in international law would be complete without a consideration of the responsibility of states. What happens when states breach their obligations with respect to the marine environment, for example, and international dispute settlement. One of the core areas of the course is the Law of the Sea Convention, which was concluded in 1982, and it has many novel features in terms of international dispute settlement and creates a new body, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, that's headquartered in Hamburg. So again, we'll be looking at those special procedures and the case law that has emerged from ITLOS and other international tribunals with respect to the law of the sea. Indeed, if we look at the jurisprudence of our central dispute settlement body in international law, the International Court of Justice, we'll find that it has a long tradition of law of the sea disputes coming before it, whether it's over fisheries jurisdiction, maritime boundaries, or the use of offshore installations for the launching of attack on adjacent shipping, the oil platforms case. So indeed, we find that the law of the sea is intimately related to general international law itself, whether substantively or in terms of the dispute settlement case law. Now, the course itself is taught in the conventional manner on the BCLM JUR with weekly 2-hour seminars. I'm the convener of the course, but I often co-teach with several of my colleagues, including Antonia Zanakopoulos and Efthymios Papastravidis. Yes, Greeks do have a long-standing interest in the law of the sea, and that's reflected in my colleagues here at Oxford. So we have the solo or team teaching in those 2-hour seminars. We also have 4 tutorials spread throughout Michaelmas and Hilary term, and for each of those tutorials you will complete an essay and get feedback on that written work. And a novelty, I believe, for the law of the sea is that we also administer 2 mock exams. One at the start of Hilary term, which is 1 question in 1 hour, for you to get feedback on your exam technique and for that to feed into how you're preparing and revising for the seminars. And then a full 3-hour mock exam at the start of Trinity term, and plenty of time for you to learn from that exercise and better to prepare for the final exam itself, which is a 3-hour paper and a choice of 3 questions out of 8. Now, the course itself is very well served by textbooks. The classic Law of the Sea text by my predecessor in the chair of Vaughan Lowe and his co-author Robin Churchill, but there are several other texts out there as well as compendia of documents. So we will have no difficulty in recommending to you key texts to support the course. And bearing in mind the importance of the subject in international law more generally, there are both general international law journals and law of the sea journals that are specialist in nature, from which we draw for the reading lists. So all in all, the course is one which should appeal to any of you who have an interest in the law of the sea, but also in international law more generally. Let me just finish by saying that if you do choose to take the course, you will find after Christmas that you are joined for several weeks by members of the Royal Navy. We run a short course for naval lawyers, not just in the law of the sea, but other subjects. So you'll have the opportunity to brush shoulders with those who will be actively engaged in applying the law of the sea aboard naval vessels or from their offices here in the UK. So thank you very much.